Today we're going to be taking care of a EGR error code on the Land Cruiser. I've had this error code since I bought it over a year ago, and it's stemming from something to do with this valve right here. So this is the EGR, exhaust gas recirculation valve itself. This is the modulator. Now I've already gone and replaced all of these vacuum lines here, and underneath the plenum, which I'll get off and show you all that plumbing under there. I've actually had success clearing this code before, and what it was there's a port right here that goes from the EGR valve within the intake here, and it plumbs back into, it recirculates, which is what this valve does, into the intake. Now this can become, I'll put a picture, it can become clogged with carbon from oil from the PCV valve entering the intake and mixing with the exhaust gas. Without further ado, let's go ahead and start taking off the intake tubing, the throttle body, and all that piping and plumbing, as well as the EGR valve itself. So I wanted to show an easy way. There's one right here and then that one right there. Those are both, there'll be studs in there. And then they look like this, or those little torque, whatever you call them. E7 is what I use. So I got those out. Before I was trying to get the nuts off, and then there was no way to actually get it off without removing the upper intake plenum, and I think the lower, and then getting that nut off. Another issue that a lot of people I've seen on the forum have issues with is the design of the EGR is so close to that engine harness. The main harness runs up by this EGR, and obviously this gets really hot. And people have come into issues where it melts through this harness right here at this EGR point, because it's so close and coming into contact with it. So last time I had that, I wrapped it with some heat wrap and then just electrical tape outside of it. There's a better way to do it, I'm sure, but anyways, that's just something to keep in mind and to inspect while you're back here. If you are having any other electrical issues, that can be a big cause of it. So anyways, after that's all off, this guy will just come out like that really easily. So now we're going to inspect it and see if it is clogged. Okay, so a couple other things I've checked was I was able to gain access to the 2 bolts that hold this up under the upper plenum. This is the vacuum switching valve, and you'll find a decent amount of research done on I Hate Mud regarding this. It is prone to failure or intermittent going in and out when it gets hot, because it's up underneath that clamshell, and there's a little bit of heat soaking that goes on there. But I did test it. I just used my cat jumper to put 12 volts on both the terminals, and I did hear it clicking pretty clearly. So I'm gonna go ahead and assume that that does work. There is a fair bit of research as far as modification of a newer one on Amazon that's made by Dorman, I believe. It's like $25. So if I do put all this back together and I get the same error code, then I will look at replacing that and actually mounting it externally. So what people do is they take the vacuum lines going up from this T. This T is underneath there, and that's going to connect your, it's going to take vacuum from the intake manifold. It's going to sit up under there, take vacuum from the intake manifold, and go to your EGR valve. And then, yeah, there's a modulator under there as well that it goes to, that comes out to your charcoal canister. But anyways, yeah, the people have mounted it externally to this with some zip ties or brass wiring or whatever, so that it's not in there, and that might be a better idea. I did check this port as well. This is another port that you'll want to check. This is brake booster. This is the EGR temp sensor. All my ports are clean. Once again, I've already checked all my ports. I checked all the ports on the EGR valve itself. These are all good. The diaphragm's good. The modulator, the little terry cloth, or the little cloth in here, is a little dirty, but not that bad. I also tested all these, and these are all good. So I'm only guessing that I realized when I went to go I replaced all the vacuum lines underneath there. I realized that this is like fuel line, and it was on the T here going up to this lower portion of the intake, that fitting right there. And this is not the correct, it's not correct for this application. So I have a sneaking hunch that this was potentially the cause of it. Now that's not going to be the cause of it for most of you guys, so that doesn't really help, but something to think about when you're going to replace all of your hoses for your intake system. These are OEM Toyota vacuum lines. That having been said, I had to go to AutoZone to grab this. I just grabbed like a foot of this. This is 556 or 556 like the ammo, or 7/32 vacuum tube. So this is rated for vacuum, whereas this, excuse me, my voice is changing. This was fuel line, I think. Yeah, it says fuel on it. So that was incorrect, and it's all stiff and brittle, and there's a little bit of cracking. For troubleshooting this, you're going to want to check all of your vacuum lines, which I've already replaced all of those. You're going to want to check this portal here that goes from your EGR valve back into the intake, and that one there, which is clogged up with carbon a lot of the time, and that can be the fix. The other way is to check the vacuum switching valve, which I already did. What else? Your charcoal canister. That mine's fine. And your modulator. Your modulator could be bad. Mine might be bad. We'll see. Anyways, I'm gonna get the rest of this put back together, and then we'll go for a drive and see how it does. Got it all put back together. We drove about 30 miles. Now, I had the battery negative terminal off, so everything was reset, and I looked on my code scanner, and the EGR parameters, like the diagnostic tests, hadn't been completed yet. That having been said, usually by the amount of miles that I drove in the stopping and starting and the highway miles, it would have came on by now. So I'm hoping that it was either that hose or putting air through the various tubes and passages that I did. That having been said, that's gonna pretty much conclude the vlog today. We'll have to see, you know, if it comes on in the future. But I kind of wanted this to be kind of a compilation of all of the threads that I, you know, had been researching on I Hate Mud. So basically, in short, if you're getting that code, I think the first place to check or diagnose is going to be all of your vacuum hoses underneath the upper intake plenum right here, and just all the vacuum hoses in general. After that, and like I said, I'll put the link in the description down to the kit from Wits End that Joey sells. And those are OEM Toyota hoses, so they're good. After that, you're going to want to check the vacuum switching valve, and all I did was just, you know, go with a negative and positive cable from the battery, or in my case, my cat charger, and then test the valve. You should hear it kind of like a purge solenoid for your charcoal canister on other cars. You may want to do the mod where there's another guy on YouTube that has put that Dorman one, and maybe I can link his video to you because he had a nice setup where it has the Dorman vacuum switching valve outside, because there is some heat soak in there, obviously, with these being an iron block. Mine happened to work, so I just wanted to troubleshoot it as if it was working. So after your vacuum switching valve, EGR modulator, which is that green guy right there. I'm sorry, mine wasn't clogged. The cloth is getting a little bit dirty, has a little bit of carbon, but it was still functioning. It might not be a bad idea to just replace those parts altogether. After the modulator, then you want to look at the EGR valve itself, that big spaceship UFO looking thing. Now that's the one with the red. That's your main EGR valve. So when I had originally taken it off, it was clogged, and I put some compressed air through it and used like a little paper clip, and that got most of the carbon out of it. Other things you can do is you can block off the EGR port on the intake plenum, and, you know, block it off on the head. I would block it off on the head too if I was going to do that, because that exhaust tube is right next to your wiring harness and all the harness for the injectors, so you wouldn't want to be compromising those since they're already compromised in that position. And if you don't live in an area with emissions, then more power to you. I don't have that luxury, so unfortunately I have to comply with emissions. There is loads and loads of information on I Hate Mud about all this. And one thing, when I was doing this, when I took it all apart and I took the upper plenum off, I didn't have to do it this time. It's relatively easy, you just have to get under there with some extensions. When I took it off the first time, there's little alignment dowels on the plenum, and they're like right here and right here, so that it lines up and then you can put the bolts in. Well, one of those came off, and I wasn't smart, because those runners for the lower intake are just open and exposed to your head, your intake side of the head. I didn't just put some paper towels down there as soon as you get the upper part of it off, because what happened is when I took it off, one of those dowel alignment pins fell down into the runner, and when I put it all back together, one of the valves was stuck, and it wouldn't run right, and I couldn't tell. I kept trying to, you know, do the timing and everything, and I couldn't figure it out. Finally, I remember hearing it drop or something like I thought it was a bolt or something that I had left. It was that little alignment pin, and it had fallen down to the head and was preventing that valve from closing. So I had to take the whole entire head off, which took obviously hours. When it's inside the truck, it's just not fun either. And then had to, you know, use a valve spring compressor and get that valve out. And I had just done the head gasket and done all the valves and everything, and lapped the valves myself. So it was just a nightmare. So do yourself a favor and put paper towels in the intake runners that are going down there. Anyways, I think that should pretty much cover all of or at least most of the threads on I Hate Mud regarding the p0401. Yeah, that's gonna conclude the vlog today, guys. Yeah, I'll be going, I'm not sure where we're gonna be going this next week for camping, but anyways, thank you all for watching. Have a safe and fun, happy 4th of July, and until next week, I will see you on the trails.